We have a great program here today. It is called We Who Built America, The History of Immigration in Jefferson County, Missouri, and it's being presented by Mr. Joe Thurman. Joe is an instructor of history at Jefferson College. He teaches courses in United States, European, African American, and world history. He holds master's degrees in history and in museums, heritage, and public history. In addition to teaching, he is the host of the Jefferson County History Minute. I don't know if you've ever seen that. We put them on our social media and on our YouTube channel, and they are awesome to learn little bits about Jefferson County. And so that Jefferson County History Minute is a podcast that he does, and he's the project director for the upcoming Slavery, the Civil War, and Reconstruction in Jefferson County, Missouri, which is a traveling history exhibit where we received a grant from the Missouri Humanities Association. So we're really excited that he's putting that together. So today's program will explore the history of immigration in the United States generally, and Jefferson County specifically, during the 19th century. It will address the push and pull factors that brought immigrants to the country from across Europe and elsewhere, and offer a glimpse into their lives and community structures. So if you'll please join me in welcoming Mr. Joe Thurman.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out today. It's a pleasure to see you all. Normally, when I'm in the classroom, I'm too loud without a microphone, and so it's kind of hard for me to say so. But anyway, thank you for coming out. I've really been looking forward to this opportunity for a long time. The one thing that I would like to say up front is my topic today is focusing on the history of immigration to Jefferson County. As a historian, I've been doing this for a real long time, and I can tell you with the utmost certainty, the greatest struggle we go through in the day-to-day battle of teaching and learning history is we want to pack absolutely every minor detail in the story. And unfortunately, time constraints and other factors kind of limit that. So as I kind of go through the program today, I'll explain to you a little bit about the periods that I'm focusing on and kind of how I came to choose that. But at the end of the day, the heart of the program is about the impact of immigration on Jefferson County here. So I'm going to start really broadly because I've spent a lot of time going through the census records of the 19th century, literally line by line in Jefferson County, tracking where folks came from. And they came from so many places across Europe and elsewhere that I think it's important to maybe kind of start real broadly and give you a sense of where they were coming from and the world that they were coming from. And then what I want to do from there is transition into where did they settle when they got to Jefferson County. And that's been one of the best parts of putting this together, was figuring out once they came over here, where did they settle? And I put together some data and things on that I'll share with you. And then to kind of pull it all together, I do have a handful of individual stories of people that I would like to highlight. I don't know that they're necessarily representative of the immigrant experience. They're not a true cross-section, so to speak, but their stories are nevertheless quite fascinating. And then at the end, of course, I will be more than happy to try to field any questions that you have. So if you're ready, I am ready. So as we go back to the 19th century, so start to finish of the 1800s, we really see in Jefferson County and across the country two significant waves of immigrants. So prior to 1830, that's the group that came in really kind of between going back to the first years of George Washington's first administration, his first term in office, up until about 1820, right about the time that Jefferson County becomes a county and Missouri becomes a state. We only see about 250,000 folks coming into the country. But about 1830, things really start to take off. And we have that kind of first significant wave from about 1830 to about 1880. That's the group that historians typically refer to as the old immigrants. They're going to be the heart of a lot of what I get into today. Then about 1880, 1890, into the early 1900s, we see a second wave, the so-called new immigrants. And what's really changing is not so much the fact of where they're coming from, but where in Europe they're coming from. The older immigrants, the ones I'm really going to focus on today, that is predominantly the Irish and the Germans and the Scandinavians and a host of other groups that I'll bring up that really we typically identify with Missouri and Jefferson County. When you get to that second wave, the so-called new immigrants, that's when you're talking about bigger numbers coming from Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, okay? So the period we're going to look at today, immigrants are coming in from all over, as I'll show you in a moment, but the heart of the biggest numbers are Ireland, Germany, and to a much lesser extent for us, the Scandinavian countries. So I do want to speak to some of these so-called push and pull factors that brought them in, because that tells us a lot about the world that they were coming from. And so I threw this lovely map up here. There's never a great map to illustrate the point I want to make here, but this will kind of get the point across. So this map is showing us Europe in 1815. So that tells us a lot about the folks who are going to be coming into Missouri and Jefferson County. So if you think about it, 1815, there is a lot going on. Here in the States, we're just coming out of the War of 1812 with Great Britain. And in Europe, 1815 is when Napoleon has been sent into his final exile, and the powers that be in all across Europe are trying to reassert the power of the monarchy and conservative government. And so this is the map of the world in which a lot of the immigrants, that first wave that come into Jefferson County, that's the world they're born into. And I could draw your attention to a few places here. So when we're talking about Jefferson County specifically, significant number from up in Ireland. We're going to see a much smaller number from France, but there will be French immigrants coming in. Of course, England will have folks coming in, Italy, Austria, but here in the middle, that's the heart of it. The only group bigger really in terms of sheer numbers besides the Irish are going to be the Germans. And when you go back and look at the census data on those German immigrants, boy, it gets confusing in a hurry because it's not a unified Germany yet. It's a collection of Germanic states. And so when the census taker is recording this, sometimes they may say they're coming from Germany, but more often than not, it's Hamburg, it's Brunswick, it's all of these cities and principalities and states. So when I'm talking about German immigration today and Jefferson County, I'm just using the umbrella term of Germany to represent all of that, with one exception. There were so many Germans who came in from Prussia. They deserve their own column because it's just unbelievable, the number that come in from Prussia. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. So that's kind of the world into which many of these immigrants are born. So the next question becomes, with respect to immigration in general, what drives people to leave home? You know, because I mean, this is a serious undertaking, especially in the 1800s. You're crossing the Atlantic Ocean. That voyage is going to take weeks. And once you get here, you may know people, you may not. So generally speaking, during that period of history, you're going to need some pretty serious motivation, right, to come over here. So that's what we call these push and pull factors. And I want to give you some specifics that apply broadly to the country and to Jefferson County specifically. So it starts with these so-called American letters. That's exactly, they are what exactly they sound like they were. When those first waves of immigrants come in, there, of course, many of them are writing letters back home. And those letters are going to go a long way in influencing people to come over here. And here in Missouri, there's no better example of those letters than this book, Report on a Journey to the Western States of North America. Gottfried Duden lives in Missouri in the 1820s, right just next door to where we are here. We know he was in Washington County, he was in St. Charles, he was in St. Louis. Odds are probably very good he was through some part of this county as well. But he lived here and wrote extensively about the experience, and then he publishes this in a book, which you can is still widely available. And he just writes in very glowing terms of the world that's over here. And I try not to overdo it with the text here, but I do want to highlight some of the things he's talking about. You know, this is the world that he's offering. This is a world without monarchy, where you have the freedom to choose what you want to do. You can get an education. And some people will later criticize him for almost kind of overselling it. But at the end of the day, Duden's work, along with a lot of other people's letters and published works, are going to be in the hands of a lot of the immigrants that come over here to Missouri and Jefferson County. There were also these things called immigrant guides. This is one of, I love this map here, which is why I chose this, but the Reverend John Mason Peck wrote this. So Peck was in this part of Missouri, out in St. Charles, St. Louis, Jefferson County, going back to he first got here right about the time Jefferson County became a county. And he lived in the area. He operated several, Baptist churches here in the area. And then he later on publishes this book in the early 1830s about, you know, why you should come over here. And you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see he's listed out Herculaneum right here on his map. And he's, you know, using this as a way to convince more people to come over. A lot of these were written in native languages, like this one on Missouri and Illinois. It's written in German, obviously targeting a Germanic audience. You've got the Irish Immigrant's Guide. And these really reached their height of popularity in the 1830s. That's when we see most of these being published, in the 1840s. But it's interesting because here in Jefferson County, after the Civil War's over, so we're talking the late 1860s, there was an organization called the Jefferson County Immigration Society. And they were trying to entice immigrants to come into the county. And I was mentioning a moment ago how difficult it is to, you know, trim things and not include them in the program. And this is a great example of that. So what you're looking at here is in 1867, the Immigration Society, on the front page of the Jefferson Democrat, which was the first county-level newspaper, just started the year before, this newly formed Immigration Society publishes this just multiple columns long description of Jefferson County. And they are using that description to try to convince people that they need to come here. And it's amazing because they start the article by talking about the beauty of St. Louis and what a bustling metropolis it was. And then you get about a paragraph in and they say, but if you just cross some of these bridges across the Merrimack and you come just south, what awaits you is incredible. And this little snippet I put up here it comes at the very end, and they address everybody. If you already have wealth, well, you can come to Jefferson County and you can buy yourself a nice farm and a nice home. If you're industrious and you want to start a business, there's no better place to do it here. We have the natural water resources and the timber to build businesses, to operate mills. And if you're a person of little means, there's no better place in Missouri right now than Jefferson County to come to get a start and to get a leg up in life. And so this Immigration Society will exist for a number of years and will continue to do that very thing. So real quickly, one last thing before I get to actually to some numbers on Jefferson County. If we're thinking real big, you know, the immigrant guides, the American letters, and these sorts of things, those are more kind of enticements on the individual level between people, their families. This is much broader. You know, industrialization is driving people out of work in Europe, bringing them over here. Great example of this that doesn't apply to us, but Andrew Carnegie. The Carnegie family came over here from Scotland because their father, a weaver, was put out of work because of industrialization. Carnegie comes over here and becomes a giant, an industrial giant. So industrialization is both pushing people out and bringing them over here. We, of course, have the infamous Irish potato famine. And the numbers of people who will leave Ireland because of that and come here are incredible. Many, many, many thousands of people. In Germany in 1848 and surrounding parts of Europe, there's a series of revolutions going on. That, as a matter of fact, is where one of the most famous paintings of Washington crossing the Delaware comes to us from. This painting was actually done in 1850 by a German artist who was trying to convince his fellow countrymen to connect their revolutions to the very same things we were fighting our American Revolution for. This painting alone will go on, it will be on public display in Germany, and I'll never have exact numbers, but this certainly was an inspiration for some folks to come over here. This painting is in the U.S. or a version of this is in the U.S. Capitol to this day. And then, of course, when Germany goes through unification in the 1860s and 70s, that's going to force people out. Italy goes through the same thing in the 1850s. So, you know, those nations are coming of age, and that's going to involve conflict and warfare, and that's going to drive people over as well. Once you get here, what are your options for getting to Jefferson County or to Missouri? Well, you're probably going to more than likely have to land in a port city, New York, New Orleans, and then either take inland riverways, or you're going to have to make the very dangerous overland trek. And I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. So what I would like to do now is I want to speak specifically to some places and locations. And I struggled mightily. The history teacher in me wants to just go to the data and show you all these wonderful tables. There's no real exciting way to present tables, so I'm just going to put this out there as a way of interpreting this. But as you go through, I started with the 1850 census, because that is the first U.S. census that actually records a person's country of birth. Before that, all they did was record the head of the household and then count the number of people in the household. So 1850 is the first time I can go to a federal census and identify specifically where folks are from. So I followed that through to 1880. Originally, I was going to take it up to 1900, but there's a huge gap in that. The 1890 census, we only have a partial census because a big chunk of that was lost forever. It was destroyed in a fire, it's gone, and guess which state happens to be on the list of records that were lost? It, of course, is us. So that would have left a huge hole. So if we look at 1850, what I did is I just kind of, 1850, the only thing it doesn't do, I wish it would do, is break it down by township. All the other census breaks it down by township and country of origin. So here's your countries of origin, and you can see the Germans and the Irish are already leading the way. Now, this may be a little over the top, but this is who I am and this is what I do. So let's go to 1860. I just listed the countries across the top, broke it down by township, and you're going to notice some commonalities here. So up to your big numbers, we're starting with England. You'll notice there's 2 from Cuba. I came across some, there was one census that had 2 children who were born in Jamaica living in the home of somebody who was born in England. So there's a very interesting backstory there somewhere that I did not have the time to unpack. But as you follow it through, you can see France, Germany, Ireland, and then Prussia, Scotland. This is the theme that's going to repeat itself into the 1870s as well, but you'll notice the numbers are growing significantly. And so, yeah, again, Germany, Ireland, and you'll notice when we talk about Irish immigration, Merrimack Township, that's where Little Ireland is. That Irish immigrants are throughout the county, but Merrimack is where their numbers are hands down the biggest. And I'm going to introduce you to somebody who lived there in just a minute. And then you'll notice with Rock Township. Now again, Germans, they're big everywhere, but Rock Township is where it seems the biggest number of Germans and Prussians were settling. So what did they do when they got here? What did their life look like in Jefferson County? And the short and sweet answer is they did a bunch. So if we go back and look at commonalities across groups, almost without exception, no matter what country you originated from, odds are very, very, very good that these occupations, farming, mining, work on the railroad, every country sent immigrants to this county that worked in those industries. in 1870, I repeatedly found examples of people living in the same building, in the same dwelling, and some of them were American-born. There were some from Switzerland, Germany, Ireland, Bohemia, Austria. They were all living in the same place, and all it said about their occupation was they work on gravel roads. So I need to know more, but that's all it said. But that's very telling. You know, they came over here probably just looking for work as laborers. And of course, the 1870s is a time when we're seeing more roads, especially gravel roads, being built throughout the county. And that was kind of a big fit. Some other things that I saw multiple times, obviously some teachers, quite a few physicians, engineers, carriage makers, coopers, millers, all the same sorts of occupations you would expect to find among immigrants just about anywhere in the country at this point. My personal favorite was one guy from England whose occupation was being a gentleman. And I thought, that's the guy I want to be. So someday, perhaps many years down the road, if I'm fortunate enough to have the time, I want to look that guy up and see what that meant exactly. So let's talk about Germans. I want to introduce you to, in the short time I have left, I want to introduce you to a handful of specific examples. And again, I really, really wish I had time to go more in depth and tell the story of everyone. Unfortunately, I don't, but I've chosen what I think are some pretty good examples. So Amanda Kroll is the first gentleman I'd like to introduce you to. So he's born in Rostock, northeast Germany, right up on the Baltic Sea. And this is Rostock. This is an image from about 1660. So it's quite a bit before he's even born, but you can see it's already well developed as a port city. He decides 1839, 1840, depending upon the source that you consult, to come to America. And it just so happens, one of his relatives, one of his descendants wrote a book about him, and in that book he recorded Dr. Kroll's, the name of the ship he came over on, the Sir Isaac Newton, and that is a watercolor of the vessel that he came over on. He lands in New York. He lists his destination as St. Louis, and he lists his occupation as a farmer. But we know by the time he passes away, he's a doctor in Jefferson County. So I don't have a lot of background on his medical training, how he got it, but his story's pretty interesting. This is horribly blurry, and I know it, and I apologize. This is the only copy of this I could find, but it was too good not to put in here. This is from a newspaper in New York the day after Amanda Kroll landed in New York City, and it is warning people in New York not to hire the crew of the ship he just got off of, because they may run up debts for you, and the shipping company is telling you, we're not covering the debts if you hire these guys and put them to work for you. So Kroll does, according to his own account, spends about a year touring what he calls the principal cities in America. He doesn't list them, so I don't know what that means. But he does, in the early 1840s, come to St. Louis, probably overland via one of these ways, stagecoaches. He may have hitched a ride on the freight wagons that were moving west, or, you know, it's the 1840s, westward migration is really ticking up. There were plenty of people going west, and he perhaps maybe came out with them. We just unfortunately do not know. He gets to our county in 1841, don't know where he set up shop, I don't know where he lived originally. He leaves for Texas and Mexico for a couple of years. He was working for a German immigration company down there, helping German immigrants that are coming into Texas set up shop, because it's the mid-1840s, so that is right on the doorstep of the time when Texas is about to become a state. So you're seeing more immigrants pour in there. When he comes back in 46, he does marry Mary Ann McFry, and the next year applied for citizenship. Don't try to read this. It's a lot of cursive and a lot of words, but this is actually straight from the court record. That is his application for citizenship. And if you go into the court records, and our Jefferson County History Center here at our library has a wonderful collection of court records and things from the 19th century. So if you ever get a chance, it's worth checking it out. But this is him just basically saying, you know, I want to become a citizen of the U.S. I'm renouncing my loyalty to Germany and these sorts of things. So it's really interesting. And if nothing else, the handwriting is incredible. 19th century handwriting is a real art until you get to somebody that's trying to write it in a hurry. And all it is a bunch of ink blots and things that you can't read. So, yeah, it is really incredible. So that is his actual application for citizenship. So he does in 1858 begin amassing his land. He's west of the big river, so here's the big river, and it doesn't show up very well, but right up there, this is a map, but this is a plat map from 1876, and you can see right there was where he had his land. But this man is a farmer, he's married, he's got 2 kids, he's a doctor, he's a poet. We do have, this is his registration as a physician. This is actually from 1879, signed in the office at Hillsborough. This is from the State Board of Health later on, certifying that he's a doctor. We do know, at least by the time the Civil War started, that he had received his training. So somewhere 1860s or before, he was a doctor. But he would publish editorials and things in local newspapers, just a tremendous individual. And when he passed away, both he and his wife passed away in 1890. His wife died a couple of months before him. Their son, who lived here in Hillsborough, had a heart attack, and she got on horseback and from their farm and rode over 20 miles on horseback to go help take care of him at home. And she got pneumonia from the journey, and sadly she passed shortly thereafter. And then he died a couple of months later. And at his funeral, he had written a poem to his friends and to his family and to his fellow immigrants. And I'm not a poet, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but just to give you a sampling of his ability as a writer, this poem opens up with, "Until we meet again, this is the meaning of the familiar words that the man repeat at the parting in the street. Oh yes, till then, but when death intervenes, rends asunder with what ceaseless pain, we wait for thee again." So he wrote several stanzas of this poem that was read at his funeral, and he is buried not far from their homestead. And you know, we don't know a lot about what comes next because they only had the 2 children, and I haven't been able to track down how much longer they lived into the 20th century. So there's more of a story to be told there. Another well-known German from DeSoto, Gustavus Hamel. Great, I did a history minute on Gustavus some time ago, and I got so many comments from folks in DeSoto, like, I know that name. I love his story, it's incredible. He had his hands in a lot of things. He did serve in the Civil War. You'll notice the year he immigrated here, 1848, so he came over the very same year that those revolutions were raging in Germany. Comes over, I don't have a real reliable explanation as to why DeSoto, why Jefferson County, other than familiarity. You know, he probably may well have already known people here. But of all the things he did, his inventions I find to be the most intriguing. Here's a photo of, you can see his name right there, of his drugstore. Sorry about that. Here is an ad to come see Santa Claus at his drugstore. So you gotta love that. Personally, I think he's got a great Santa Claus beard already myself, so maybe it was him. I don't know. But he was a tremendous inventor, and these are actually from his patents. So a new version of a washing machine that he patented. This is his recliner, his chair that he patented. But the thing that's going to get him really into history books is his economy school desk. He actually got a write-up. This is from Scientific American that did a write-up on this. And there's 2 different versions. So this one is from 1885. This is from 1889. And if you ever look real closely at patent applications, whoever does this stuff, they have these great drawings, but then they have this detailed text explaining what it does. I'm not an engineer. I'm not even going to try to tell you the difference between the two because they look the same to me. But this gets him in the history books, so to speak. So I know I'm running short on time. Do I have a couple more minutes to? Sure. Okay, thank you. So let's talk about Irish immigrants for just a minute. The McNamee family, incredible story. At the same time, tragic. So the McNamees, think Merrimack Township, far northwestern corner of Jefferson County. That's where Little Ireland is. There were Irish there before the McNamees, but John, who was known, there's a Long John and a Short John. This is Long John. One of his kids is Short John. I'm assuming one was tall and one was short. I don't have pictures, so I don't know. But John is born, his parents, Michael and Catherine, had at least 5 kids, maybe as many as 8. We verified 5. John's one of the 5. He's born in Clogher, Ireland. There is anecdotal evidence that maybe he was trained to become a priest as a young boy. He never does go through, I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of.
Seminary.
Yeah, he never goes completely through seminary that we know of. But he's the first to come to the United States. He settles in Baltimore. He works as a gardener for the Stewart family, ends up marrying their daughter Jane. This is St. Patrick's where they got married. Shortly after they got married, Jane, the Stewarts were Protestant, he was Catholic. Jane married him and became Catholic, got shunned by the family, and we think that's why they decided to come to Missouri, because there was another fellow here by the name of Bailey, I believe, who already owned land in Merrimack Township. He was from the same place in Ireland that McNamee was, so they came out here. That's probably why they came out. Started purchasing land in Labarge Hills, what we know as Little Ireland in that part of the county. About 215 acres to his name. Great legacy. This is Merrimack Township. This is the Merrimack River. And you can't tell, obviously, because it's too small, but all of that's all McNamees and other Irish immigrants, that whole part of the county. They started, like so many immigrants, they started their own churches and schools and really transplanted their native culture over here. It's really incredible. This is his estate when he died. Considering that he came from a place and a time where he was born into and grew up in a family where he was not even able to own land in Ireland, to come over here and to amass that, I mean, that's the epitome of the classic American European immigrant story. So there were a couple of others in his family, his parents and a brother George and his entire family and a nephew John, they all come over because that potato famine where they lived in Ireland, 10 to 19% of that population was dependent upon soup kitchens to survive. So they came over here in the 1840s. Liverpool, New York, New Orleans. This is what New Orleans, how it would have appeared about the time they arrived there. They leave New Orleans, they travel north to St. Louis, and this is what St. Louis would have looked like around the time that they got here, if they got here. We know that Catherine, John's mom, died coming across. There was a child born to George and his wife coming over, and when you see them in the census, they're listing out all the kids, and where it lists where this child was born, it just says on board ship. And those are the nuggets that just make this really cool. But some versions of the story claim they came up to St. Louis and then came out to Merrimack Township. Problem was, it was 1849. You just left a potato famine and you came to a major U.S. city that is in the midst of a horrible cholera outbreak. So the other version of the story is they got off at Herculaneum and actually walked the 20 some odd miles to get to John's land. There some other McNamees real quick. A brother, George, founded McNamee School, which was located right about there. They ran that for over 40 years. He had a son that went to California and got a part of that gold rush that was going on, and apparently made enough money that he was able to tour the world afterwards. And then, as you can see, another George became a St. Louis police officer. One last person real quickly. I would be remiss if I didn't address the Fredericis, classic French immigrants to this particular family settled in Maxville, which goes on to become part of Arnold, talking over Old Church Road there on Jeffco Boulevard, nearby where Lowe's and Deerbergs and all that is. That was their farm right there. And they came in, they helped found Immaculate Conception, which was the first Catholic parish in that part of the county. As a matter of fact, oh shoot, I didn't put it in. Oh wait, there. Wow, I was looking at this thing, I didn't put it in there, and I'm looking at it. That's Immaculate Conception. That's from the 1876 Atlas. So she's born on the family farm, which would have looked something like this. And as a young lady in the 1860s, she met that fellow, Buffalo Bill Cody, and she married Buffalo Bill, and that is the Frederici's daughter's claim to fame. She lived with him until they were married for the rest of their lives. She even wrote a book about it, Memoirs of Buffalo Bill by his wife. It's an incredible story because by all accounts, Buffalo Bill was not the best manager of money in the world. And while he was out gallivanting the globe with his Wild West show, she was at home tending to the farm. A lot of the land that they bought was actually in her name. And they are now buried together out in Colorado. And I have already gone over time, and you don't know how badly I just want to keep going. But I'm so sorry. But I will be happy to take and answer to the best of my ability any questions that you may have.
I need to take the microphone to go over as.
Yeah. My good history there.
I actually live in Maxville Gardens is the name of my street, so I'm right there where you're talking.
Beautiful.
Okay, any questions?
Why was the immigrants came over that ought to E or the O or to put a different name or change their name?
So that's a really good question, and there's really several different potential answers to that. Like with John McNamee, his actual birth name was McNeil or McAneal with an L on the end, and he was the first to come over here, and he's a great example of somebody who, the first records we have of him over here, he had already changed his name, but he didn't really explain why. A lot of times those name changes go back to the fact that when immigrants came in, whoever was recording their entry into the United States, a lot of times you're going to have language barriers and things. So just like census takers, they get in this horrible habit of just writing it down the way it sounds to them. And so that's going to lead to a lot of changing of spellings and things. And census takers were notorious for that. They would just go in and say, I think this is what you said, and they'll just write it down, and that is what it is. So, and I've even seen instances where a historian generations back is telling their story, they misread some of these documents, and then they put their misinterpretation of that spelling into a book or an article, and then it just kind of becomes self-perpetuating.
Thank you. Okay, I think I saw some other hands. One sec. The Cobbles. I was wondering exactly where Little Ireland was. If you didn't hear that, where exactly was Little Ireland? Here I come.
I'll meet you halfway. Great question. And this is the perfect map to show you. So this is Merrimack Township right here, this pink square up here. So if you were to just kind of divide it in half and then another quarter, that top far northwestern quadrant, right? If you were to drive out Interstate 44 out to Pacific, you drive right through it. As a matter of fact, a lot of people think of Little Ireland as being both in Jefferson County and then Franklin County. Thank you. I just want to make sure you all knew that.
One more question. Okay.
Yes.
The Gamache family that traveled here from Canada and also started the El Camino Trail through Missouri.
Yeah, I am not, that's a little outside of my wheelhouse, so to speak, so I don't know that there's much I don't know that there's much that I can add to that, unfortunately. I do know that when I was researching to put this together, that I did come across several families from Canada that came in. Unfortunately, I've not really tugged much at that thread, so sadly, I don't know really much about their experience or their family. Was there something specific you were hoping to know about them, or?
Well, he had actually funded all the Jefferson County.
Oh, okay, yeah, I did not realize that. So my apologies that I can't address that any further, but you've given me something else to add to my to-do list, so thank you.
I knew you were going to say that.
Let's give Joe Thurman one more round of applause.